Let's create a pivotal impact. Friends in the industry. So before we get started today, I just wanted to take a moment and highlight just how important it is to keep our eyes wide open when considering the opportunities available for you and your organizations in the transportation and logistics industries. So our industries are navigating through a time that has seen massive supply demands, but also equipment shortages, labor shortages, as well as on the flip side, a bunch of technology integrations that are honestly changing the way our industry operates today, and even more so as time goes on. So when we take a moment to process the events happening around us, it doesn't take very long to identify some serious opportunities to improve the way we run our businesses and ultimately uplift our people to help advance their journey. So far too often, we fall into the trap of having tunnel vision and literally living out our days basically on fast forward, which ultimately means that we can miss what's happening around us, miss out on different opportunities that are right in front of us that honestly we just need to get after. So I'm Josh Hanneberg, your host here at the Truck Focus podcast. And our mission here is simple. We're connecting transportation industry leaders to the industry to help create a pivotal change. So when I think about what's possible in the transportation industry, opportunities become a whole lot clearer when you're speaking to industry leaders that are heavily invested in what's happening, but are also providing solutions to help. Which is why I'm super excited for my conversation today as I get to speak with Jamie Irvine, the owner of the Heavy Duty Parts Report. So today, Jamie breaks down how various organizations in the transportation logistics industries need to take their businesses online to navigate through the current but also upcoming challenges and how he's helping organizations and their people get started. So additionally, we dive into the power of quality and consistency when building our brands, which ultimately leads to stronger relationships, not only with our people, but also with our customers. So I encourage you to learn more about the Heavy Duty Parts Report by visiting heavydutypartsreport.com or checking them out on all major social media platforms. Before we get started in our interview today, I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you. So if this is the first time that you've ever checked out the Truck Focus podcast, thank you. And I really welcome you to our community, but also a huge thank you to our current community and just the constant dedication that you're providing, listening in on just industry leaders sharing much needed advice, but also implementing this knowledge and advice that we get shared or get told each episode. I'm just super grateful as you create a pivotal impact in your day-to-day interactions. So throughout today's conversation, I ask that you consider what is it that you're getting impacted by, and let me know in the comments or send me a direct message because I really appreciate learning from our community. Additionally, if today's episode does impact you for the better, I ask that you like this episode, but also share it out so that way your network can learn more about our community and the industry leaders creating a pivotal impact. So I'm super excited for the impact today's conversation is going to have. Let's get to it. All right. All right, Jamie, welcome to the Truck Focus podcast. Really excited for our conversation today as we navigate, obviously, who is Jamie Irvine, but we also talk about the heavydutypartsreport.com and learn about something that you were kind of hitting home with me not too long ago when we were talking about how you're helping your clients get online and the importance of being online, being visible, having brand recognition, all that good stuff. So really excited. And yeah, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. And we love the work that we're doing at the Heavy Duty Parts Report. And we try to make our show accessible, whether it's on our website, like you mentioned, heavydutypartsreport.com, or on all the podcasts and social. It's part of the game you got to play to get the word out. But we love what we're doing over there and supporting the independent service channel in the trucking industry.
Awesome. Yeah, it's great to have you here. So can you just give us a quick rundown on your backstory of how you got to where you are today?
Sure. So I started in the truck parts industry in 1998, right out of school. I had moved to Vancouver and was looking for a job. And what I thought was just going to be a short-term thing, I ended up working for that company for 10 years. I started off sandblasting parts, eventually became the shop foreman, got into the operations side of the business and became the operations manager. And then I was the national sales account manager for that company. Shifted into selling parts for a distributor. So I went from manufacturing to distribution and worked for Traction Heavy Duty in the Vancouver area. Was an award-winning salesman while I was there and did very well. In 2009, though, the whole world was in turmoil, much like it is today. And they were shutting down corporate stores. And I kind of saw the writing on the wall. So I stepped away from the industry, started a contracting business with like a $700 investment. And my wife and I built that company and rapidly scaled it with digital tools. And we sold the business in 2016. And in that time, we had moved to Alberta. And my old boss from Traction was now working for Pacific Truck and Trailer, who is owned by Truck Pro down in the States. And they had 4 retail stores. And the name of that division is Arctic Truck Parts. And they just happened to have a store in my hometown where I'm living now in Edson. And my old boss called me and said, "Hey, I heard you're living in Edson. We got a sales guy who's been thinking about retiring. He's like 70. Would you like to get the gang back together again? Different company, but kind of the same gig." And I said, "Yeah, that would be great." So I started working for them again, sold truck parts again, just reminded me of why I love the industry so much. And I was so happy to be back. And as I was working, selling parts for them, the idea for the heavy duty parts report was born through my entire career, whether I worked for a manufacturer or I was working with manufacturers as a distributor. I loved bringing them out into the field, talking to fleets, talking to repair shops, talking to technicians. And I thought, well, what if we capture those conversations and made them available? And so that was the birth of the Heavy Duty Parts Report. And we just celebrated our 3rd anniversary. I did resign my position at Arctic at the end of 2019, and I've been working full-time as a consultant with heavy duty parts, manufacturing, distribution, and service repair companies ever since.
Good for you. Yeah. And something that really stands out is opportunity. And so when you're thinking about your progression, because you've had a very progressive career and your business is very progressive, has that always kind of been your like state of mind? Have you always kind of thought that way? Or is it just you picked up tools along the way where you're like, hey, this works faster? And you talked about digital tools, automation, I'm sure, digitalization. But yeah, how have you processed that as you've just advanced?
It's kind of funny because sometimes you have to take a couple steps back to take a step forward. So when I was leaving high school, every kid I knew was going into the computer sciences. And I remember thinking, if everybody I know and everybody they know is going into that field, is there going to be a supply and demand problem? I loved economics. And I was like, is there going to be a supply and demand problem where there will be more people than the demand? And of course, I was naive and kind of misunderstanding how big the internet was going to be. But because of that decision, I found the truck parts industry, and I found this industry and a niche within the industry in the parts side of it, where there was already back in the late 90s, early 2000s, there was a need for people, and that has only exponentially grown. So I really learned the foundation business skills working for those companies, the people side of the business. Digital wasn't even a thing for me. It wasn't even on the radar. In fact, in the 2000s, I was very proud that I didn't even have a cell phone. I was almost anti-technology. And part of that, I think, had to do with some of the mentoring I had. Some of it had to do with just the fact that I was a guy in his 20s who was more interested in running around in his Mustang and maybe like chasing girls or something like that. But anyway, we'll talk about that off air. But as I started to grow up, got more serious about my personal life, got married and was raising a young family, and I found myself in 2009 with this new business. I had just left the truck parts industry. I had this new business, and I knew that I needed to do something to scale the business, and I needed to do something that was different than what my competitors were doing. So that's when I got really serious about digital. So I wish I could say that I was this futurist who was always forward thinking. That's not the case. It was more out of necessity. And so I remember learning Google AdWords Express, and that doesn't even exist anymore. But I kind of dominated Google AdWords Express in my area, and very quickly that put me out in front of a bunch of my competitors. Then I mastered Google AdWords, and then it just grew from there. And once I realized how efficient a digital sales channel could be and how it could scale your business so rapidly, I became obsessed with it. And when I came back into the truck parts industry, I tried to share that passion with a lot of people in the industry, and there was just no interest at all. At all. And in fact, there was, in many cases, there was a lot of resistance to it. And so, of course, that's all changed since the pandemic. But leading up to the pandemic, I was beating that drum, saying we need to modernize the industry. We need digital sales channels in place. We need a better buying experience. We need to take advantage of digital tools. And nobody really was interested. But then, as soon as the pandemic hit, they were like, "Hey, remember Jamie was talking about that? What the heck was he talking about?" And then all of a sudden, that was the birth of my consulting business. So It's kind of funny how it went. Like I said, I wish I could say I was this like really forward-thinking person, and I am now. But it was really because I had no choice. I had to figure out a way to scale my business rapidly back in 2009, and the lessons I learned, I guess, will stay with me for the rest of my career and my life.
Hey, Josh here. Just a quick interruption of our conversation, as I really want to encourage you to learn more about the Heavy Duty Parts Report and just see the types of value that they can bring to your journey and your organization. So you can do so by visiting heavydutypartsreport.com. I've included the link directly in the show notes. Let's get back to the episode.
My life.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's when hard work meets opportunity. All of a sudden, it's like, were you like in the future and you brought this knowledge back with you? But yeah, I think that's interesting. I also like, so when you talked about you're having all these conversations, then you have to get it out there, because that was my exact thought process when I started the Truck Focus podcast. Is I'm like, man, I have a lot of good mentors, people that are really willing to share advice to solve my problems. I'm like, I can't be the only person facing this problem. So it's nice that we're like-minded in that space. And we saw, hey, so in your field, obviously as a podcaster, as a presenter, speaker, do you find that from your perspective, is there a lot of competition, or are you kind of a one-man army really shifting the parts industry?
Well, when I started, there was virtually nobody. In fact, I had a podcast before the Heavy Duty Parts Report. Did it for about 2 years, 150 episodes. It was just called Build a Better Business, and it wasn't specific enough. I could never get any real traction. So the day that I decided to shift to the Heavy Duty Parts Report, like I said, I was a sales account manager. I was out selling parts every day, and I put in my phone in my podcast app. I just typed in Heavy Duty Parts, and a few shows popped up. There was some logistics shows. There was some stuff around transportation. There was some stuff specifically about drivers, but there was nothing really about heavy duty parts. And so I think I was one of the very first people to recognize that segment of our industry was underserved. And so we established ourselves as the industry leading show. I would say over the last couple of years, some people have seen what we've done, both individuals and from a corporate perspective. And there are more shows dedicated to parts than in the past. Competition is a funny thing. So yeah, okay, there's people competing maybe for the parts segment now that weren't there, but I never felt like I really compete with anybody, even the larger trucking industry space where people are making content. That's not who we're competing with. We're competing with every other source of media and content being produced. So even if you took everybody who's in the trucking industry who's making content, you put us all together into one group, who our real competition is every other sector and industry trying to target the people in the trucking industry. So we're competing with the news, we're competing with politics, we're competing with sports, we're competing with hunting and fishing, we're competing with every other source of media and content. And so when you start to see the bigger picture, you see that your colleagues who are producing content in the trucking industry are your friends, not your competitors. Because the more that we do it, the better job we do, the more legitimate our shows and our productions become in the minds of the people in the industry. So that's a good thing. And the better job we do, and the more we push each other through competition to be better, the more likely we are to be able to fend off some of these other industries who are trying to capture the hearts, minds, attention of people in the trucking industry. That's my perspective anyway.
Yeah, man. Yeah, very good. That's great leadership too, because I think a lot of times people stop doing something because there's other people in that space. And have you heard of the book or the author Wallace D. Wattles?
I have.
Yeah. And one of my favorite things is to create, not to compete. and just shifting your perspective where it's like, we speak differently, we view industry differently, so why don't we use each other's strengths and just say, okay, Jamie, go talk to so and so, this is awesome, instead of no, that's my audience, leave me alone. So but yeah, that's a really good perspective, and again, from our listener standpoint, so it's really good encouragement too, because I think a lot of times that's why people stop. Oh, it's dominated. It's like, well, do a little bit of research. And so, but that's really good. I appreciate that.
Podcasting is only 15 years old, like roughly, let's say 15 to 17 years old, depending on when you draw that line in the sand. We are still a very new media source, and this is going through constant development. The one thing I will say, though, is beyond just like being consistent and getting out there and getting better yourself, you do have to innovate, and you can't just keep doing the same thing forever and expecting it to produce the same results, because I can tell you what was working in 2019 is not the same as what's working in 2022, and what will work in 2023 and beyond is probably going to change again. So you do have to have consistency and structure, but you also have to be willing to test new things. So I always say, always test new kinds of content, learn from it, and develop your craft. And if you do that and you really, really care about your audience and you're trying to serve them, there's always going to be a spot for you.
Agreed. Yeah, I completely agree. Really good encouragement. And I'm really grateful because you've been really encouraging to me along the way. And I remember when I first learned that someone else was in Alberta, I was like, no way. Because there's like, shout out to Chris and John, and obviously Bruce in Ontario, and Jason's a little further east. And you're like, we're like local. This is so cool. So yeah, I just really appreciate your mentorship.
Yeah, if we wanted to, in a couple hours, we could be meeting in Edmonton and having a beer.
Exactly.
Halfway between where I live and where you live.
Exactly. So where, I know I dropped the website, but what's the best place you'd like people to go to? Obviously for the Heavy Duty Parts Report. Is it the website? Is it just
No. The way I've built it, heavydutypartsreport.com. You can listen to the episodes right on the site. You can follow the podcast by joining our weekly email list and getting updated on new content. You can watch the videos. You can read our articles. You can interact with all of our content there. But if you like being on YouTube, you can subscribe to our channel, but you can find the links to that on our website, heavydutypartsreport.com. Also, we're on every podcast player that I can think of. I've registered us on all of them. So again, if you want to find a list, you can go to heavydutypartsreport.com, and there's links there for you to be able to find anything that you need. So that's our home. That's where everything happens, is on our website.
Good. Okay, good. Yeah, and I'll include the link in the show notes too, of course. That way it's quick and easy for people to hop on. So, okay. So as I mentioned in our prior conversation, you were talking about how you're helping companies get online. Mm-hmm. Before we talk about the getting component, how important is, as we're mid 2022, 2023 is only a couple blinks away. How important is it for organizations to develop a brand, be seen online, but also have like an overarching experience they can create online? How important is that?
So you got to take a step back and look at the macro influences globally. So in 2019, they did a global census, and they discovered that there are 708 million people over the age of 65. And only 680 million children under the age of 5. This is creating what is called demographic inversion, where our population has been, our birth rates in the West have been dropping about 4% every year. But globally, we are now entering a period of time when our population is going to begin to shrink. And there's no fixing this. It's too late, because it takes 20 years to produce a child and raise them up into an adult where they can join the workforce. So between 2022 and 2030, the youngest baby boomers will be retiring. 2030 and beyond, there's not enough Gen Xers to replace the baby boomers that are exiting senior positions. And the millennials, the oldest ones, are just starting to take senior leadership roles today. It's going to take another few years for them to completely move into those positions. So no matter what you do, you're going to be competing for fewer and fewer people. And what's really interesting about this information is that by 2050, the gap between the amount of people over the age of 65 and the people under the age of 5 is going to double. It's going to get worse. And when you think about that, what that means is it doesn't mean that there won't be young people. There still will be, but the competition for those people is going to become more intense every day moving forward. Literally daily, it's getting worse, and there's more competition for those assets, that labor force, daily. So what that means is that you have to figure out a way to do what you do more efficiently. You need to make your customers more productive because they're facing the same labor shortages that you are. And the labor shortages is not an acute byproduct of the pandemic. It is a chronic systemic issue that started about 40 years ago. And there's just no changing it because you just can't produce humans faster than roughly 20 years, right? That's how long it takes to become an adult. So the joke is, if every childbearing adult went home and got to work on the problem today, we're still 20 years away from solving the problem. So you've got to understand that, because that is going to impact every single aspect of being in business, no matter what industry you're in. When you understand that, you see how a digital sales channel and how automation is going to be a large part of the solution. And through increased productivity, less people can do more. This is how we solve the problem. And not that we ever can solve it. And this also doesn't mean that you don't focus on training and recruitment. That's going to be more important than ever because every industry is competing for the same limited resource, right? And so going back to those basic principles of economics with supply and demand. So getting the digital sales channel in place, some of the research that we've done at our consulting firm is we found that it costs anywhere from 30 to 60% less to accept an order online versus in person or over the phone through the traditional method. We found that you can actually move approximately 35% of what you sell over to a digital sales channel almost on day one. Well, what does that do? A third less phone calls, a third less emails for your people to handle, right? But conversely, it's not just about you as a supplier. It's also about your customers, the fleets, the repair shops, the owner operators. They all are under the same time constraints, the same people constraints that you are. And so if you give them a solution that is more efficient for them, makes them more productive with less people, they're going to buy more from you. And the research that we found is that once you move that first 35% of your purchases over to a digital sales channel and your existing customers start buying that stuff through your digital sales channel, they start to buy more, and they start to buy products they've never bought from you before because it's so easy and they're already there and it's so efficient that they start to say, hey, you know what, I'm already here. So yes, throw on that, for batteries or wiper blades or rags or shop supplies or whatever it is. So there's some big macro things happening. And if you're in the business of keeping trucks and trailers on the road, you got to understand the implications of those things. And then you have to have a strategy in place to be able to really carry you through this difficult time that we're in, and also into the future where the situation, especially on the labor side, is only going to get more intense and more difficult.
Totally. Powerful. Okay, that's a really good overview. That's probably honestly the most in-depth and best overview of how to get there that I've experienced. So thank you. So when you're talking about digital sales channels, is that plugins on websites? Is that a dedicated platform? If we're going to talk parts, or what exactly would that be for? Just I can't say an everyday business, but a business in transportation.
So people immediately think e-commerce, but there's really three parts to it. So you have to think about like a traditional parts distribution company. If they set up an e-commerce platform, they get their ERP, the right ERP, they get all that integrated, and ERP is just the system that they use to like keep track of inventory, issue invoices, do their accounting, that kind of stuff. They also need all the data around the parts that they sell. That's a huge component. And they have to have the right e-commerce platform, because just because you launch an e-commerce platform, it's not a build it and they will come scenario, right? So from a technology stack, you have to get that part right. And that's a big foundational piece of a digital sales channel. But it's so much more than that. It also encompasses the marketing side of your business and what we would, call content marketing, because your brand is so important. People need to know about you. They need to understand your value propositions. They need to understand what you stand for, why you should do business, why someone should do business with you instead of a competitor. And it's, by the way, it's not just that you have, high quality parts at a competitive price and in stock, although those things are important. Those are barriers to entry. So you have to go beyond that. So one of the things that I found is a Pew Research study that showed that people who are using e-commerce platforms, using digital sales channels, they want to learn about 57% to 70% of what they need to learn without ever talking to someone. Then in a complex sale, like, is this the right transmission gear or right gear ratio, or, some technical question like that. Then they want to be able to put their hand up and say, hey, can I just verify this is what I need? And once they talk to someone, they verify it, then they go ahead and process the order. So you've got your technology stack with your e-commerce platform and your ERP and your data. You've got your content marketing with your branding, your social media, your email campaigns, your communication strategy, all of that. And then you have your outbound sales. And that's where the salespeople are actually using the digital tools to scale their effectiveness on behalf of the customer, to be more accessible, to be able to get that information that marketing is producing into the hands of the right people so that they know exactly what they need to be able to make good quality decisions. And when you get all of these things working together, they're kind of like three circles, but they create this like Venn diagram. And the overlap of these three areas is your digital sales channel. And all of this creates a great buying experience for truckers, owner operators, regional fleets, and repair shops who are relying on these companies to get the things they need to keep those trucks and trailers on the road. And what I found is that when you get those three core things in place, it's like a three-legged stool. It will not stand on its own without those three pieces in place. And then you have like 9 things, because each one of those three have like 3 more core things you have to consider. And so we've created this great model that covers all of that. And we walk companies through and we just get them to score how they're doing. And, we use a red, yellow, green. And unless all of those things are green, it's not going to be as effective, and it's not going to create the buying journey for the customer to keep them coming back and making them more productive, which addresses those other macro labor shortage issues we talked about earlier.
Powerful, man. Good for you. I can tell you're a leader in this space. From a company wanting to work with you, what's the time frame to get that entire process completed?
Right.
Sorry, good. Yeah.
So we work with our clients typically in 90-day sprints. So the first 90 days is usually a whole discovery process to see what you've already done, what's missing. Then we help you develop a strategy that's custom fit for your business, laying out a timeline. And then usually by the third month of that first 90 days, we're into implementation. We're starting to work on the actual execution of this strategy we put in place. From there, it's really highly dependent on the resources available, and what other issues or challenges the business is facing that is competing for resources. But on average, I would say that a 6-month time period to get from zero to get the foundational pieces all in place for a digital sales channel is pretty standard. It's a little maybe even aggressive. I think that I always recommend companies do a crawl, walk, run, because they're, it's like one of my mentors said, you kick over a rock and 8 spiders crawl out, right? So 8 problems, you think you're solving one problem, but you discover there's a bunch of other issues that you have to address. So realistically, I would say that you should start now. And you should plan on a 6-month, 12-month, and 18-month kind of time frame to go from that crawl stage to the walk to the full-on run, where you're getting the full benefit of that. And there's that optimization period that's really necessary on the back end of one of these projects. But we can get a company up and running in 90 days if they've got the time and the resources and they're going to dedicate their team to it. We can pretty much get all the foundational pieces in place, the strategy, and get them executing. And then there's going to be a time frame that they're going to have to work at executing the strategy, of course, that follows that. But yeah, and the great thing is the results are, I mean, your brand value for your company can double. Your revenue can go up. You can sell more to existing customers first, and then you can get net new customers in new geographical areas. We've got one company right in my hometown. They sell welding supplies, and they're global now. You know, they, like little town of 8,500 people, and they're selling welding supplies to people in Australia. Like, go figure, right? So the upside to this is it's exponential once it gets going.
Totally. Yeah. No, and that was going to be one of my questions, because ROI is often one of the first questions of a senior leader is, what's it going to cost and what am I getting back? So that's really good that you hit that. So when we're trying to build brand online, so if we're talking social, talking outbound relationship, in your opinion, can you in your expertise, I'd actually say, can you differentiate the difference between quantity and quality for sharing content? Is there a...
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, I'll give you one platform that we're very successful on is LinkedIn. And we've done a lot of testing around this, and you can share other people's content on LinkedIn and virtually get nothing. The response rates are very low, which is really weird, because you'd think that sharing content on the platform in platform would be something that would be rewarded. But conversely, you can take someone's content that they've made. You could even copy a part of it, put it in a new post, tag that person, and say, like, this was really great. I really appreciate what you said here. And then you can add something to that. And the reach on that can be exponential. Like, it can be surprising how many people will see that. I think that when it comes to making content, you have to be careful about a couple things. One, content for content's sake has no value. And two, if you make something that actually enhances or improves an individual's ability to operate their business, or you share something that supports the industry and helps us to see a better perspective, you know, things like that truly have intrinsic value, that's what resonates with people. And that's what creates engagement. And that's what boosts the algorithm and gives you more reach. So I would say that if you are going to start in the content game, focus on quality all day long and be consistent. So even if you're not, you know, you might say, well, what is consistent? Well, consistent could be a monthly post. It's not going to give you a lot, but it's better than being inconsistent. And then once you master that, you can start doing a weekly post. And once you're consistent at that, maybe you do twice a week, right? And then you can kind of gauge what you need to do to really speak to your customer. But quality and consistency, when you bring these two things together, it creates really great results. Another thing that I would say is people quit way too soon. So with all content, you have a hockey stick curve. So it's very just small incremental improvement over a long period of time. And then after a specific period of time, who knows when that is, all of a sudden your content starts to go like this and your reach starts to expand. And so it's really important to stick with it long enough to actually see the results.
Yeah. Yeah. I was reading an influencer, I can't pronounce his last name, first name's Tim, and he was talking about the power of video. And it was like an 8-month little thing. And then after the 8-month, it just really like skyrocketed. But yeah, it's those little tweaks. And I'm noticing that too as a content provider. And again, so when you're talking about, if you're taking an excerpt from someone's content, tagging them, and I like doing that approach, because again, you're uplifting that person and that person is now identified as a leader. So that's really good advice. And yeah, I do know a lot of our listeners, they have time to post or they are posting. So it's, again, I just appreciate your expertise in that space.
You know, there's something else I wanted to talk about when it comes to content and your brand awareness, like, especially from a leader of a business, you are looking at ROI. What I found very interesting is that when you begin down the road of a digital sales channel, content creator, anything in that realm, anything digital, in the beginning, you target the things that you sell or the subjects that are relevant to your industry to try to get people to find you, right? So for example, I have a client that sells diagnostic tools. And when they began, they put a lot of effort into things like hashtags like diagnostics done right, which is still one of their trending hashtags, diagnostic tools, diesel technician. That's how people found them. But at a certain point in their journey, when the hockey stick curve fully kicked in, they found that their traffic source completely changed from those kinds of keywords to their brand keywords. Their company is Diesel Laptops. Now, what does that do for the value of your company when people recognize your company as a industry leader and people are searching your company's name instead of the hashtag? And what does that do to your competition's content, right? And how do you put a value on that? Well, I can tell you that through some extensive research that we did and some work that we did to evaluate that, what we've discovered is that it literally doubled the value of their company. Think about that for a minute.
Wow.
Yeah. Because now if they were to go to sell their company, they're not just selling a company that sells diagnostic tools, they're selling a leader in the space. And anybody who would want to buy their company is buying it not so much for the diagnostic tools and that kind of stuff, because anybody can get that. They're buying it because it's Diesel Laptops.
Yes. Yes.
Right. So if you can become now that's a national player, and they're 7-8 years of hard work to get there. Even if you're a regional person, you can still create that kind of leadership, and your brand value can still go up quite a bit. And that can help you get more customers. It can help you to establish better supplier relationships, and it can help you to position your company in such a way that you can monetize that. So I always caution people from drawing linear direct lines from a piece of content to ROI on a sale, because it's never a straight line. It's like this. It's all over the place. It goes, and it impacts so many different areas of your business. You got to do a bunch of things right to actually capitalize on the true value of what you're doing on the digital side.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I noticed too, the more consistent you are in that space, other leaders start to you migrate towards each other, and strategic partnerships can get built, affiliate partnerships can get built, and just your name starts getting dropped in scenarios just because you're consistently speaking on stuff. So, but yeah, okay, that's really good to know, because again, I get asked all the time, is it worth it? Is it worth it? And it's like, it takes so long. And like, yeah, it's worth it. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. So how have you seen, so when you're building relationships, not just with clients, prospects in an industry, and I know you're able to speak at a handful of events down south, which is super cool. How have you noticed the change, or have you noticed the change in how people build relationships now in industry, being obviously in person to solely virtual, back in person? Is there a different energy that you're seeing now?
So I'm a student of Brian Tracy, and I made my sales career on one book, The Psychology of Selling. And what I found the biggest change is that before I had to become aware of you some way. So I had to meet you or be introduced to you by referral. Then I had to build rapport with you. Then we would transition into a subject of whether or not we could work together in some capacity. And then we would try to execute on that. And sometimes it would work and sometimes it wouldn't. What digital has done for me is it has front loaded everything. So one, I have scaled the amount of introductions I get, whether they come virtually or even from someone the old fashioned way, just saying to a colleague, oh, you got to talk to this guy, Jamie from Canada, so it's scaled my reach and my reputation, and it's scaled the amount of people I get introduced to. I then am able to build rapport with people digitally before ever having actually met them in person or even talk to them on a video call. I then can get to more people because I have a lot less travel with virtual tools. And then when I finally do meet them, the most common thing that happens is I get a hug. It is truly amazing to build a business relationship with someone and have such familiarity with them, have such high levels of respect and rapport, even though we've never actually met in person. When we do meet, it's like two old friends coming together and having not seen each other for a long time, despite never meeting in person prior to that point. And you get the big handshake and, the bro hug, and you're so happy to see each other. It's just transformed all of that. It's front loaded all of that. And the result is that I can do more business more rapidly, and I can close more business because I'm front loading all of that effort that usually, historically came after we met in person.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, good. And that's a really good perspective too, because I think being video shy is no longer possible. Like, you have to be willing to hop on and turn your camera on and build those relationships. And yeah, I love the instant broships where you're just like, yeah, we've known each other for a year, but this is like physical. And yeah, so I think that's really powerful. So
well, and something right now, like you and I are talking on video conferencing tool, and we're only a few hundred kilometers apart, but in a lot of cases you might be thousands of miles apart. But what's really interesting is that the brain doesn't know the difference. So there's something in psychology called the social zone. It's basically a 3-foot circle around your person. And so if you're at a trade show or something, and Josh, you and I are familiar with each other, we trust each other, we're going to come within 3 feet of each other and we're going to talk just like we are now on video. And in person, if someone comes into that social zone and you're not comfortable, you don't feel safe, either you're going to back up or you're going to push them back, right? So on video, the brain doesn't know that we're hundreds of kilometers apart or thousands of miles apart. The brain actually thinks we're in the social zone right now. And so what that does is that's why the rapport is built through video conferencing tools, because the brain thinks we're in proximity to each other. It can't distinguish the difference, because the video conferencing tool, like we have set up right now, basically is replicating being 3 feet apart. And so it's a psychological thing, but it's something that, our like ancient brain, our nervous system, it can't distinguish the difference. So it's kind of a hack. And it's one of the reasons why video is so powerful. Now, here's the great thing. We're talking in person, but that same effect can be applied to me recording a video of myself and putting it on social and you watching it.
Powerful.
Yeah. And if you don't know these kinds of things, then you don't realize how to kind of leverage it to your advantage. But once you learn them, you never forget them, and you're immediately able to see value in things that otherwise you're like, yeah, this takes a while to get built up, but it's so worth it.
Yeah. Totally. Man, you're rocking my world right now. This is good. I appreciate the education and the leadership. So awesome. And so one of my favorite questions to ask in leadership is intentionality and legacy. And I can tell you're very confident in your space, and I really admire that. And I know that, again, I've been a witness of your impact for quite some time. So even though we've had a couple of conversations, I'm always like, man, you're constantly teaching me. So as a leader in our industry, are you really aware of how you're moving pieces, how you're impacting people? Like, you spend a lot of time processing that, so that way you're intentional and you can create a bigger impact? Or is this is who Jamie is and you just kind of run with it now?
Yes and no. So yes, when we launched the Heavy Duty Parts Report, we had a 25-year plan. We broke it into 5-year segments, and then we broke that first 5 years down into basically daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly activities. And so, like I said, we're 3 years into our first 5 years, and I'm happy to say that we're very much on track, and in many ways, we're ahead of schedule. So, did I have a big macro vision and a long-term plan? 100%. I suffer, I appreciate you saying like the confidence and things like that. But I got to be like completely transparent. I suffer from imposter syndrome just like anybody else. There are days when I feel like I'm like, who am I? Am I doing the right thing? Do I need, how could I be better? Or why did I say that? That was, I'm kind of down on myself. So not every day is just filled with brimming confidence. There's those ebbs and flows. And when you're doing something and you're on the right track, that feels really good. But I think that you do have to keep a level of humility and recognize that you're not perfect and you are making mistakes. And you will, you've made mistakes in the past, you're going to make mistakes in the future. So you have to be willing to accept that. So that's where the yes and no, like I'm very intentional. I have a very long-term plan. I'm thinking big picture on a lot of issues, but day to day, I'm still human and subject to all the same stresses and worries and concerns that anyone else has. And I think that embracing that a little bit and just admitting that is actually something that makes you stronger, not weaker. So one of the other things I would say is I am continuously surprised when people come to me, especially like when I go to those events. It's industry events. You get to meet a lot of people in a very short period of time. And I've had some amazing experiences, like people who are very influential in our industry come up to me and say, we're rooting for you. We need you. Keep going. Don't stop. Or we've got people who are in the industry saying, I was like you. I was in parts and sales and you've inspired me. And now I'm doing this thing and it's so much better in my life. And thank you. And that is such a amazing thing, but I'm constantly surprised by it, because I don't think you really truly ever have a full perspective on yourself, right? It's hard to see yourself the way other people see you.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's a big compliment too, because that's totally how, again, virtually and soon in person, you've mentored my journey. Is okay, and you're really kind and willing to share. I think that's a really huge part. But I like the fact that you remain humble, because I think a lot of times it goes to people's heads. And
well, I don't know if you can say, if I say I'm humble like I just did, maybe does that make me, I don't know.
No, it is.
But I appreciate you saying that.
No, and again, it's nice because you're real. And I love the term imposter syndrome, because I fight it all the time too. And I was speaking with a client 2 days ago on that, and they were trying to shift their focus on like owning their space. And I'm just like, we all go through it. So just again, I can't say you're on a pedestal, but I definitely identify you as a leader in this space that's helping my journey.
Thank you.
So I just appreciate it. So absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah. And I to that person that you were just referencing, like, I never worry, and I shouldn't say worry, that's the wrong word. I try not to think about being like a leader in my space. I try to think about it from terms of my clients and my audience. What do they need? And if I stay focused on them and less focused on me, I have less anxiety.
Yes.
The more I think about me, the more anxious I get, the more worried I get about my future, the more, because I mean, we're all, we got families. You want to be successful. You want to take care of the people that you love, and you worry about the long-term instability and what the long-term implications of that are in the world today. And all of those things creep in on you and make you more anxious. But if you kind of just push that to the side for a moment, focus on serving, and not just, and see, there's a bit of a misunderstanding on that, because it's not just serving, it's adding the value and serving with a purpose, right? I always say businesses have to be profitable. They can't just be out there giving stuff away, because if they're not profitable, they can't grow and they can't scale their impact on their customers. So you still have to have a good sound business strategy. You still have to be rewarded for what you're doing. But you just need to put the focus on your customer, put the focus on the audience that you're trying to speak to, serve them, give them something they need. And I promise you, good things will happen.
Oh man, this is why I was so grateful that you came on the podcast today, my friend. So thank you so much. As we do end, can you just let our listeners again know where's the best place to visit for the Heavy Duty Parts Report?
Well, go to heavydutypartsreport.com. And if you do want to reach out to me on social, my handles are all Jamie L. Irvine. So you can just reach out. I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, the works. But yeah, everything is housed at heavydutypartsreport.com. We would love and be honored to have you listen to our show.
Awesome. Yeah, and I will gladly make sure that our audience goes in that direction. So thank you so much again, Jamie. Really appreciate you hopping on. This was fun.
Take care. Thanks.
You too.
Bye.
Bye. Jamie, honestly, thank you so much for taking the time, joining me on the Truck Focus podcast, and for the mission that you're on, impacting so many people and organizations in our industries. So as I reflect on our conversation today, I just really appreciate the guidance, Jamie, that you shared with respect to why we need our businesses to get online and how important it is to creating your own consistency when creating your online brand. So I think far too often people don't act because it's just too overwhelming. But as Jamie said, even if you're posting once a month, you're still starting. And from there, you can create your own consistency for showing up and creating your brand and really showcasing who you are. So Jamie, I really value the mission that you're on, and I'm equally as excited as about the impact that you're having. I just think it's phenomenal. So to our listeners, I really do encourage you to learn more about the Heavy Duty Parts Report by visiting heavydutypartsreport.com or checking them out on all major social media platforms. Highly recommend that you also check out his podcast. All in all, Jamie, you're doing a great job, and I'm just super super grateful. So thanks again for hopping on. So before we end today, I did want to take a moment just to continue to say thank you. So if this is the first time you've ever checked out the Truck Focus podcast, again, I welcome you to our community. And to our dedicated community members, thank you so much again for taking the time to listen, but more so for implementing the knowledge that Jamie shares and just, again, creating a pivotal impact in your day-to-day interactions. At the beginning of our interview, I did challenge you to say, hey, if there's something that really stands out from today's interview that's created an impact or will create an impact in your journey, I ask that you let me know. So shoot me a message, put it in the comments, whatever it is, because again, this is how I learn from our community too. Additionally, if something did really stand out in our interview today with Jamie, I do ask you share it out, share out the interview, share out what really just like, hey, this was really key advice, whatever it is. But also ask to like this episode, to subscribe to our channels. So that way, again, you're notified of all upcoming content that we do release at least once a week. As always, let's create a pivotal impact.